Hello everybody. So today we're going to be talking about land survey systems, but we're really going to focus on one specific one, and that's the public land survey system. You might hear it also be called PLSS or USPLSS, but it's a rectangular survey system, and it's basically how we decide to split up land in the West. So the Public Land Survey System was established by the Land Ordinance of 1785 and the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, and the survey system was managed through the U.S. General Land Office, which is now has become the Bureau of Land Management, or the BLM. And it was designed to survey and dispose of most of the land in the U.S. beyond the colonies. And so these are the states that use the PLSS system. The video that I have attached to the lab does a nice little history of the PLSS system, and you can see here in California that we use the PLSS system. So we have three big meridians. We've got San Bernardino, Mount Diablo, and Humboldt. And you can see you've got basically the 13 colonies that don't use it, and Texas doesn't use it because Texas was its own individual republic at the time. And then Hawaii also does not use the PLSS. So how does the system work? How do we figure everything out? Well, so what it does is it wants to still kind of go off the basic same ideas of a geographic coordinate system, where everything is based off that Cartesian coordinate plane. So what they did was they established townships and sections and rectangular or square portions of sections, and they did that in every state. So every state has baselines, which are the east to west lines, and they have meridians, which are the north to south lines, and then some states have more than one, or some states share one. So if we go back here, you can see California, we've got 2 baselines, but we have 3 meridians in the states. And you can see what they're talking about here. Oregon and Washington are sharing a meridian and a baseline. So some definitions to get comfortable with that we can understand. I'm going to move myself out of the way here so you can see that clearly. So principal meridian, that is a meridian or a line running through an arbitrary point chosen as a starting point for all sectionalized land within a given area. And the big thing about a meridian is it's going to run north-south, whereas a baseline is a parallel of latitude, and it's going to run, so that means it's going to run east-west, and it's going to run through that same arbitrary point, which is the chosen starting point for all the sectionalized land within that given area. So our biggest units are going to be townships, which are going to be 6 mile by 6 mile square areas, and then the townships are going to each contain 36 sections in them. And if you think about 6 times 6 gives you 36, that means that all the sections are going to be 1 mile square box of land, and that means it's going to contain 640 acres, and they're going to be 1/36 of a township. So if we wanted to get even bigger than that, we're really going to focus at the township level and down, but you can go even bigger. You could have a tract of land, and a tract is 24 miles by 24 miles square. Now, it's interesting because we use tract we use it as a term in forestry to kind of just mean kind of any parcel of land of varying size, whereas in the public land survey system, a tract has a very specific designation of 24 miles by 24 miles square. Okay, so let's start with our baseline and our meridian. Now this should look this picture on the right here should look very similar to you. It should look like that basic geographic coordinate system, the basic Cartesian coordinate system. We've got our Y, we've got our X, and then we've got values, and we extend out in all the directions. So we've got townships and ranges. And so we can see, let's take this first box right here. It says Township 1 North, Range 1 East. So if we see the meridian and the baseline, we know where they intersect. That's going to be your starting point. So how this designation works is it's saying this township is 1 north of this starting point, and it's 1 east of this starting point. So we can, if we go right here farther east, we can see it still says 1 north because we didn't go any farther north, but it says 2 east now. Whereas once we go farther north, you'll see it says Township 2 North, Range 1 East. And then if we go farther east and farther north, Township 2 North, Range 2 East. So townships are going to be the horizontal row of townships, and the range is going to be the vertical column of townships in the PLSS. And so what you really want to see out of this is just get this basic idea that north, east, south, west. So if we're here, we're range 1 west. If we're here, we're range 1 east, because everything goes off of that starting point or the intersection of the baseline and the principal meridian. So a township, 6 by 6 miles square, 36 square miles of land, or 23,040 acres. It's identified by that relationship to the baseline and principal meridian. So if we say something like Township 2 North, Range 3 East, this township is 2 townships north of a baseline and 3 townships east of a meridian. And of course, township has 36 sections in it, which we've already mentioned. So if we kind of try and put more of a map to it than that example before. So here's our principal meridian, here's our baseline. So our initial point, or our starting point, that's where everything is going to be based off of. And so for this area here, we can see the different townships involved. Now notice it says 6 miles, 6 miles, 6 miles, 6 miles. So right here, so this is a tract of land, this is a tract, this is a tract, and within that tract we have our townships. So we'll have 16 townships in a tract. Now, townships themselves are surveyed beginning with section 36, progressing north to get to section 1. And for some reason, all sections are surveyed going south to north. Townships may not be exactly square due to the curvature of the earth. And then sections 1 to 6, which are the last line of the township, as well as 7, 18, 19, 30, and 31, which are the last sections in the line, may be irregularly shaped because of trying to fit them in next to each other and dealing with just surveying issues. And so if we take a look at what it looks like to have all these sections within a township, we can see here, let's take the yellow township to start out with. So you can see we're going to start with 36, right? And then we can see here is our system, and we just keep snaking all the way till we get back north. And then there's that last line, which is 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then this line also here with 7, 18, 19, 30, and 31, that it's very possible that those could get irregularly shaped due to just surveying issues. Now, the reason this is all multicolored is to just kind of paint that picture in your mind that here is the next township, here's another connecting township, here's another connecting township, another one, another one, another one. One thing I want to kind of bring to your attention is noticing patterns, because there's patterns that are going to stick throughout this. So for instance, in terms of the corners, if I look at the corners, no matter what corner I look at, I'm going to see the same pattern of 36 next to 31, above 6, and above 1. If I go down here, 36, 31, 6, 1. Over here, 36, 31, 6, 1. 36, 31, 6, 1. One of the things that's big about the public land survey system is the idea of trying to simplify it and making sure that it was easy to understand. And so trying to get this system where you go from tracts to townships to sections, and really trying to keep it to where it's always it always has the same order to it, really makes it easy to figure out. So let's put a map to it and take a look. So right here, here's our section right here in our township. So we've got our 36 sections, same pattern that we've seen before. There's that corner with 36, 31, 1, and 6. Now what's interesting here is this is the idea of, well, what if you had like a lake or something right there? You still want to, as best you can, keep the square shape to the township. So you can see right here, it's still like you had the same 36 townships, and it's just going to be the lake is part of that area. So when we get down to the section level, each section is 1 mile square, so 1 mile by 1 mile. That's 80 chains by 80 chains. So that means a half mile is 40 chains and a quarter mile is 10 chains. Or sorry, quarter mile is 20 chains. So in each section you have 6,400 square chains or 640 acres, because 1 acre is 10 square chains. They're numbered and arranged in that serpentine manner. So 1 is in the upper right, 36 is in the lower right. So looking at it again, here's our township. There's 36, lower right, 1 in the upper right. And when they surveyed, they started from the south and worked their way north. So like that is how they surveyed this piece of land. And it's each of these is 1 mile by 1 mile in a 6 mile by 6 mile township. And so if we kind of make it pop out, we can see that we've got our baseline and our principal meridian. So if that's the case, if this is our initial starting point, if we go, if we're looking at this specific section, that is township 2 south, range 2 west. So there's our initial starting point. And so we go 2 south and 2 to the west. And that gets us to our section. And so in our section, we've got our 36, our township. In our township, sorry, we have our 36 sections. And so if we look at section 13 here, we can see we can even divide it further. So it's 640 acres, but if I were to quarter that, that would give me 160 acre sections. If I quarter that again, that would give me 40 acre sections, and I can quarter it again to get me to 10 acre sections. So if I look at this star right here, and I want to say where I am, I'm in this particular instance where this star is, I'm in the southeastern quarter of the southeastern quarter of the northeastern quarter of section 13, township 2 south, range 2 west. So let's go over that again. I'm in the southeastern quarter of the southeastern quarter of the northeastern quarter of section 13, township 2 south, range 2 west. And so it's, once you get used to that, it's a language that is pretty easy to understand. You just have to think about it and try and keep it as clear as you can. So I've got another way to look at it here, where you break it up. And if we're looking at it, so if I'm starting off with the whole thing, I start off with 640 acres. I'll move myself out of the way. There we go. So we start off with 640 acres total. If I take a quarter of that, I'm at 160. If I take a quarter of that 160, I'm at 40. If I take another quarter of that 40, I'm at 10. And if I take another quarter of that 10, I'm down at 2.5 acres. So if I say something like a quarter section, I'm talking about the northwest, the northeast, the southwest, or the southeast. If I'm talking about a half section, here's an example here with the eastern half, or if I say a half of a quarter, right? So if I said a half of a section, I'd be talking about either the western half or the eastern half. But if I say a half of a quarter, so then that would be, let's say, the eastern half of the northeastern quarter. This is the eastern half of the northeastern quarter. So now if I try and put that acres wise, well, I know that a quarter section is 160 acres. So then if I have half of 160 acres, that means that this would be an 80-acre piece. And what's nice about this is you can divide this all the way down. You can have it at 640 acres, or you can divide it all the way down to 2.5 acres, but it was an easy way to give people land for them to know exactly where their land is. So our other one right here, a quarter section, the southeastern quarter of the southeastern quarter. So if we look right here, the southeastern quarter of the southeastern quarter. And what would we be talking about in terms of acreage? Well, we know this is 160. And so if we quartered it again, that means that would be 40. Now, in the example we had before, it was quartered one more time. So it was 10 acres in the southeastern quarter of the southeastern quarter, but that was in the northeastern quarter of that section. So, in terms of trying to describe it, it's really important to understand this idea of kind of working your way backwards. So, right here, this example here, it's the southern half of Section 16, Township 159 North, Range 101 West. And so, when I'm looking at it, if I'm looking at this here and I'm trying to think of it, I got to work my way backwards because I got to start with right here. So this is the southern half of this section, which is section 16, and then I'd have to figure out my township and range, which it says is 159 north and range 101 west. So it's really, I mean, if I start here, it's a lot harder to say, okay, well, it's range 101 west and it's township 159 north, and then let me figure out what section I'm in, and then what half I'm in. And if I wrote it that way, it would say township 159 north, range 101 west, section 16, southern half. But if you think about, if you say it that way, it's kind of, it doesn't make as much sense, or it's a little bit harder to figure out. It makes more sense to start off with the smallest portion and say the southern half of section 16 of township 159 north, range 101 west. And so when you're making these descriptions, you want to start smallest area to largest. So in this example here, where this X is written, if we're going to write out a long description of it, it'd be the southwest quarter of the southeast quarter of the southwest quarter of section 7, township 9 north, range 5 east. So let's go over that. It's the southwest quarter of the southeast quarter of the southwest quarter, which is that whole thing, of section 7, and then of township 9 south. Sorry, that should be township 9 south. I wrote that wrong. And range 5 east. So this should say south. But we can write that in a much quicker way. So here's an example of it here. Southwest, southeast, southwest, section 7, township 9, range 5 east. That's one way to write it. Another way to write it, southwestern quarter of the southeastern quarter of the southwestern quarter, section 7, township 9, north, south, should be south, range 5 east. We'll have those slides fixed by the time you're looking at them. And so just trying to put the whole thing together. So we start off with our principal meridian and our baseline. For California, let's use the example of a principal meridian down here would be San Bernardino, and then our baseline, I believe, is 1852. So the initial point, or the starting point, is the intersection of the baseline and the principal meridian. And so if we're looking at this example here of Township 2 South, Range 3 West, we would go 2 south of the initial point and 3 west of the initial point, and that gets us to our township. Once we get in that township, now we want to figure out what section we're working in. We're in section 14, so that's right there. And then in this example, the one that's shaded is the northeast quarter of the northwest quarter. So if we're to say it in an easier way for people to understand, we would say, where am I at? I'm in the northeast quarter of the northwest quarter of section 14, township 2 south, range 2 east. And then to be even more specific, throw in whatever that principal meridian and baseline are, so people can know exactly, all right, I need to find this map. And then once I find that intersection of that baseline, there I go, okay, I see where we're at. So just looking, focusing back on the measurement idea. So here's an example of the Mount Diablo Meridian, Township 10 South, Range 21 East, Section 20. So we're in California because we know it's the Mount Diablo Meridian. In California's 3 meridians are the Humboldt Meridian, the Mount Diablo Meridian, and the San Bernardino Meridian. So not only do we know we're in California, but we also kind of have a general idea of what part of California we're in. Northern or Central California, because we're not in Northwest California, because that's Humboldt, and we know we're not in Southern and kind of the southern central part of California, because that's off the San Bernardino. And so we see this X here, and it looks to me, if I was a betting man, that this X here, that would be the southeastern quarter of the northwest quarter of the northeast quarter of the northwest quarter of section 20. And so it's just getting used to that. Well, now also what I want to get used to is the measurements that go with it. And so we know, knowing the idea that these sections are 1 mile by 1 mile. Well, that means that the section is 5,280 feet by 5,280 feet. So if I cut that in half, that would mean it's 2,640 feet. If I cut it down to a quarter or quarter mile, that's 1,320 feet. So then I can start figuring out these sections. So if I look at that, well, I know if I go halfway of that 1,320, that means I'm at 660. So this piece of land right here is going to be 660 feet by 1,320 feet. And I can figure out the acreage, or I can figure out the square footage that's going to be within that area. Same thing goes right here. So we can see 660 feet, and I see this, and that's this little area that's going to be 330 feet long, because I know if this is 1320, if I did 1, 2, 3, 4 of those lines, 330 times 4 gets me 1320. And so that kind of helps us in terms of trying to figure out measurements in terms of both perimeters. We can look at the perimeters of things to figure out the acreage or the square footage, but we can also just kind of come up with the with the acreage on our own if we really understand the system. So if I'm thinking about it, so I know this whole thing is 640 acres. So if we just focus on this X right here, well, this is 640 for the whole thing. So if I go to this quarter of that, that's 160. If I go to that quarter again, that's going to be 40. If I quarter it off again, that's going to be 10. And if I quarter it off again, that's 2.5 acres. So that X is on 2.5 acre area. And then we can start thinking about even areas like this. So we know that is, if this is 160 acres, this is 40 acres, which would mean that this half acre area right here that's crosshatched, that's 20 acres. We can kind of just do that for all of them. So if this is 20 acres, I know half of that would be 10 acres. Well, if I look at a quarter there, that's supposed to be 10 acres. If it's half of 10 acres, that means this is a 5 acre area. And if I do the math and do 660 times 330 and then convert from square feet to acreage, I should get that same answer to it. And so you can kind of see the different things that so you can see right here, 5 acre mill site. Well, let's follow the arrow. Oh, look at that. It's exactly the area we said is 5 acres. 20 acre placer claim. If I follow that little area, that's exactly the area that we said was 20 acres, right? Here's a 40 acre one. And if you get all this whole southwestern quarter, that'd be 160 acres. So it's just getting comfortable with kind of the language of the system and the idea of just being comfortable with these numbers. So here's some other numbers. Move myself around again. Some other numbers to get comfortable with. Not all of these are important because some of these terms aren't really used that often, like lengths, rods, and furlongs. But one chain, 66 feet. Very important to know in forestry. 1 acre is 10 square chains or 43,560 feet. 1 square mile is 640 acres. 1 mile is 80 chains or 5,280 feet. Those are all pretty important and things you definitely should just memorize. Just kind of going over some other ideas again. So quadrangle, that's the same as saying a tract. By some definitions, you'll hear quadrangle or you'll hear tract, 24 miles by 24 miles. Township, 6 miles by 6 miles. Section, 1 mile by 1 mile. And then half section, half of a quarter, quarter of a quarter, so on and so forth. And we can see our mileage, and we can see our square mileage, and we can see our acreage, and then even meters squared and kilometers squared. And here's just another look with both the lengths and the areas involved in these different ways of cutting up these areas. So important ones to remember: 1 section, 640 acres, and that would be 1 mile squared. 1 chain, 66 feet. Chain equals 4 rods. You can remember it. It's not as important as the other ones. 80 chains equals 1 mile. 1 acre equals 10 square chains. And that's the general gist of the PLS system, the PLSS system. There's not that much to it other than just kind of getting comfortable with the terminology and getting comfortable with that changing of acreages. But I'm hopefully provide you with a worksheet that's going to make you think about that and really kind of paint that picture for you. For the rest of the slides, I really just want to kind of focus on certain important units of measurements just so you have an idea about them. So the first one we're going to start off with is the chain, or as it was known for a while, the Gunter's chain. And that's a unit of length equal to 66 feet or 4 rods developed by Edmund Gunter, and it became the standard measuring chain that people would use in surveying. And it was actually like a metal chain that people would like hook up to their belts and drag through the woods or wherever they were surveying, and actually use it and say, okay, this is 66 feet, and that's how they started doing the measurements. In 1695, Queen Elizabeth, and the reason, if you say to yourself, well, this is America. Well, yeah, not in 1695. In 1695, there wasn't a United States, and so Queen Elizabeth had the mile redefined from the old Roman value. So in old Roman times, a mile used to be 5,000 feet. Nice round number. Makes sense, but she had it redefined to 5,280 feet because they wanted it to be an even number of furlongs, which is 10. So a mile is 80 chains or 8 furlongs. And so it's an interesting kind of history that the way chain kind of came about. It's not something that's just obvious or easy to understand, but one chain equals 66 feet. That's kind of the important lesson to get from it. An acre. An acre is a unit of land area used in the imperial and U.S. customary systems. It's defined as the area of one chain by 1 furlong. And so a furlong is 10 chains. So basically an acre is 10 chains by 1 chain. So whether you want to think about it, if I'm drawing it on the screen here as 10 chains by 1 chain, so that area would be an acre, or 1 chain by 10 chains, that was how they first came up with an acre. Now, can you just make a square that's an acre? Sure, you can, as long as it comes out to the same area, which is 4,840 square yards, or 43,560 square feet. And so for the PLS system, PLSS system, it came out that using squares would be much easier in terms of these acreages. But as long as it comes out to the same area of 1 chain by 10 chains, or 66 feet by 660 feet. And if you do that math, you get 43,560 square feet. So an acre, what does an acre look like? I like using this example because most people are used to seeing something like this. So if you look at a football field, and you take away the end zones, and you take away 10 yards, then you have an acre. So when you look at a football field, you're basically looking at an acre. It's just a slight little bit off from that. And then I've got this nice little comparison down here as well. So if here is 1 acre of land, this is what a half acre of land would look like in comparison, a third of an acre of land, and an eighth of an acre in land in comparison. So you can kind of just see, if you took this image and then you just started chopping away at it, that would that kind of gives you that visual of an eighth of an acre compared to a third of an acre compared to a half acre compared to an acre. So how big is an acre? So 90% of a football field, 16 tennis courts in a 4x4 formation. That gives you more of that kind of a square acre, or just the basic numbers that we've kind of talked about, 4,840 square yards, 43,560 square feet, or 1/640th of a square mile. A hectare. A hectare is the metric unit of area. Hectare is 10,000 square meters, or 2.471 acres, or an acre is 40% of a hectare. And another way to look at it is a hectare would be 107,639 square feet. And so I've got a link right here, so you can pause the video and check out that link, and that gives you some comparisons in terms of sizes of fields to a hectare. And so here's another comparison to just kind of paint that picture. So if I took a soccer field, which is a little bit wider than a football field, an acre would be about half of a soccer field. But if I put that same soccer field onto a hectare, you can see I have the whole soccer field plus a little bit of extra space, because remember, an acre is only about 40% of a hectare. So a hectare is 60% bigger than an acre. And so I'll kind of leave you with this picture right here, because I completely understand that some of this stuff, when we get to the idea of math and forestry and trying to put it together, almost seems a little bit like learning a foreign language. But with enough practice and with enough time, it just starts to become routine, and it just starts to become easy. So be patient and do your best. Let me know if you have any questions.